Dear learners, in this chapter we are going to trace history of Europe and its emergence as a developed world. You see any data, European countries name emerges in top 20 list. Here in this class we will examine how and why it happened. This lesson will cover topic the Renaissance, what it means, the changes it brought and the scholars who were important during that time. Learners, historians often uses different kinds of 14th century materials like documents, printed books, painting, sculptures, buildings, textiles which are preserved in archives, art galleries and museums of Europe and America present day. The term Renaissance was coined by Jacob Burckhardt, a scholar from the University of Basel in Switzerland, who had studied under Leopold von Ranke, a prominent German historian. While Ranke emphasized the importance of government documents in writing about politics and state, Burckhardt felt that this narrow focus did not fully capture the essence of history. He believed that history was just as concerned with cultural development as it was with political events. In 1860, he wrote a book called The Civilization of Renaissance in Italy. He focused on literature, architecture and painting to tell the story of new humanist culture that emerged between the 14th and 17th century. This culture believed that individuals could make their own choices and develop their abilities, which was different from the medieval thinking influenced by the church. Italy was left in ruins after the collapse of Western Roman Empire. Many towns that were once crucial, they got politically and culturally affected. There was no central government. The Pope in Rome, who had his own state, was not a strong political figure. Meanwhile, the rest of Europe was being reshaped by feudal bonds and unified under the Latin Church. Italy remained weak and fragmented. However, changes is inevitable and we see in future revival of Italian cultures. The trade between Byzantine Empire and Islamic countries led to the growth of ports along the Italian coasts. Italian cities like Venice, Milan, Geneva, Rome and Florence played a key role in trading with China and Europe while maintaining their independence. Few of them like Florence, Venice and Geneva were republics. The administration of most of the cities were in the hands of rich merchants and bankers. They were free from the control of conservative clergy and feudal lords. This helped the idea of futureship citizenship concept. Cardinal Gasparo Conterni explained in his book The Commonwealth and Government of Venice that the whole authority of city is in the hands of council, which includes all gentlemen over the age of 25. The common people are not admitted to this council because popular tumults arises in cities when the government is swayed by them. The government of Commonwealth is defined by nobility of lineage rather than wealth, with all nobles and virtuous citizens having the right to government. Italian towns were home to some of the first universities in Europe. The University of Padua and Bologna were focused on legal studies from the 11th century. Since commerce was the main activity in the city, there was growing need for lawyers and notaries. Law soon became a popular subject of study, but the focus shifted. Now, it was studied in the context of ancient Roman culture. Petrarch believed that to truly understand antiquity, one needed to read the actual words of ancient Greek and Romans. Therefore, he emphasized the importance of closely reading ancient authors. The term humanities came from Latin word humanitas, meaning culture. This was used by Cicero in ancient Rome. By the early 15th century, the term humanists was used for masters who taught grammar, rhetorics, poetry, history and moral philosophy. These skills were not related to religion, but focused on individuals' development through discussion and debate. In the 15th century, Florence became known as an exciting intellectual city and a center of artistic creativity. Previously, the city had not been recognized for trade or learning, but the works of Dante Alighieri and Giotti changed its status. Many universities, including the newly established one in Florence, were attracted to the revolutionary ideas that were emerging. During this time, individuals with many interests and skills became well known and were often referred to a Renaissance man. They were known for being a scholar, diplomat, theologian, artist combined in one. According to the beliefs of humanists, Europe was shrouded in darkness for centuries after the fall of Roman Empire. It was not until the 14th century that a new age began to emerge. The period between the fall of Roman Empire and the start of 14th century was known as medieval period or the Middle Ages. During this time, religion and churches had an overwhelming influence on people's thought and actions, leading to the disappearance of Roman and Greek teaching. Humanists argue that modern period began in the 15th century. In the Middle Ages, Greek and Roman scholars' works were only available to monks and clergymen. It was not until the 14th century that scholars began reading translated works by Greek writers like Plato and Aristotle. This was possible because Arab translators had preserved and translated ancient manuscripts. European scholars read Greek translation, while Greeks translated Arabic and Persian works on natural science, mathematics, astronomy, medicine and chemistry for transmission to other Europeans. The Almagest of Ptolemy was the work of 140 Common Era on astronomy in Greek language and was translated into Arabic. It carried an Arabic alphabet Al, which shows connections with Arabs. Ibn Sina, an Arab physician and philosopher of Bukhara, and Al-Razi, the author of medieval encyclopedia, were considered as men of knowledge in Italian states. The Christian thinkers adopted the method of Arab philosophers of Spain, Ibn Rushd, who tried to resolve the tension between philosophical knowledge and religious faiths. During the Renaissance, humanism was not only promoted through education, but also through art, architecture and literatures. Artists were heavily influenced by the works of past, and fragments of art found on ancient ruins served as inspiration. Italian sculptures were particularly inspired by perfectly proportioned male and female figures, and Donatello's lifelike statues broke new grounds. Scientific advancements helped artists create more accurate human figures, with some even studying bone structures in medical school laboratories. Andreas Vesalius, a professor of medicine at the University of Padua, was the first to dissect the human body, which marked the beginning of modern physiology. Italian painters used geometry to understand perspective and light to create three-dimensional painting. Oil as a medium gave paintings richer color, and Chinese and Persian art influences added to the realism. Their knowledge of anatomy, geometry, physics and appreciation for beauty continued until the 19th century. In the 15th century, Rome saw a renewed interest in classical Roman and Greek architecture as the popes gained more political power. This came after a period of weakness caused by the election of two rival popes. Archaeologists excavated the ruins in Rome, inspiring a new architectural style. The popes, who were wealthy merchants and aristocrats, had architects who were familiar with classical architecture. Filippo Brunelleschi was another notable artist who began his career as a sculptor and designed Florence's spectacular Duomo. Unlike before, artists were known individually by their names rather than as member of a group or a guild. The printing press was a major breakthrough in the 16th century. It was originally invented by Chinese and later introduced to Europeans by Mongol rulers. Johannes Gutenberg, a German inventor, printed 150 copies of Bible using the first printing press. Printed books became widely available, allowing students to study from them instead of just relying on lecture notes. This also made it easier for individuals to purchase copies and develop a reading habit. The spread of Italian humanist culture across Europe was accelerated by the availability of printed books. During this time, there was a loosening of the strict control that religion held over human life. People began to view the pursuit of material wealth, power and glory as more acceptable. Some scholars even questioned the Christian belief that pleasure was wrong. The humanist culture emphasized the importance of developing good manners, including polite language, proper dress and social skills. This was a stark contrast to the three orders of feudal society. In the past, women were not included in idea of individuality and citizenship. Public life was dominated by men from aristocratic families who were the decision makers in their households. Sons were groomed and educated to take over the family business from their fathers, while some younger sons joined the church. Women had no say in business matters and their dowries were invested in family businesses. In case where an adequate dowry was not possible, daughters were sent to convents to become nuns. However, the position of women in merchant families was somewhat different. Wives often assisted their husbands in shops and looked after the business when the men were away. In the event of early death of a merchant, the widow took on a larger role in public life. Some women were intellectually creative and valued humanist education. During the 15th and 16th century, humanist idea attracted many scholars in northern European universities. They advocated for Christians to follow ancient texts of their religion and view humans as free and rational agents. Thomas More and Erasmus criticized the church for its greed and extortion of money from ordinary people through the sale of indulgences. Clergy sold these indulgences documents which freed the buyer from the burden of sins he had committed. Printed translations of Bible in local language revealed to Christians that such practices were not permitted. Peasants rebelled against the taxes imposed by church, and humanists pointed out that the clergy's claim to judicial and physical power originated from supposed donation of Constantine document issued by first Christian Roman emperor. Martin Luther led a movement called the Protestant Reformation. His belief was that people did not need priests to communicate with God. Instead, He asked his followers to have complete faith in God, for faith alone could guide them to the right life and entry into heaven. Luther did not supported radicalism, but it survived and combined with the resistance of Protestants in France who were persecuted by the Catholic rulers. This led to the idea that people had the right to remove an oppressive ruler and choose someone they prefer. Catholic Church also underwent change and reformation, with churchmen emphasizing the need for a simple life and service to the poor. In 1540, Ignatius Loyola set a Society of Jesus to combat Protestantism. His followers were called Jesuits, whose mission was to serve the poor and to widen their knowledge of their culture. Learners, did you know the scientists once challenged the Christian belief that man is a sinner in a unique way? It all started with the groundbreaking work of Copernicus, who lived during the same time as Martin Luther. Christians believed that the earth was a sinful place, which made it immovable. They also thought that the earth was at the center of universe with the planets revolving around it. However, Copernicus disagreed, asserting that the planets, including the earth, revolve around the sun. He entrusted his ideas to his followers Joachim Rheticus on his deathbed, but it took some time for people to accept this concept. Thanks to the works of astronomers like Galileo Galilei, the gap between heaven and earth was bridged. Johannes Kepler helped popularize the theory of earth being a part of a sun-centered system, with Kepler's cosmological mystery demonstrating that the planets move around the sun in ellipses rather than circles. Galileo confirmed this dynamic world idea in the work The Motion. The scientific revolution reached its peak with the theory of gravitation by Isaac Newton. Galileo noted that the Bible sheds little light on the working of the heavens. Scientific inquiry based on observation and experiments led to the scientific revolution and the replacement of God with nature as the source of creation. Scientific societies such as Paris Academy and the Royal Society popularized these ideas and established a new scientific culture. Learners, one question generally arises between historians: was there a European Renaissance in 14th century? During the Renaissance, Europe experienced a lot of dynamism and artistic creativity, but it is an oversimplification to say that the Middle Ages were completely gloomy. It is also not entirely accurate to say that the Renaissance meant creating a pre-Christian worldview for Christians. Other parts of Europe were also going through cultural changes during this time. In fact, many scientific advancements were happening in other parts of world, such as the Arabian world, South Asia and China. European culture was influenced by these regions as well, thanks to trade routes that allowed new ideas to spread. One significant change during this period was the separation of private and public life. People were no longer just members of one of the three orders, and artists were known for themselves rather than just being of a guild. Europe was also developing a sense of identity in different regions, with each state being united by a common language. That is all for today's class. I am sure that you have learned a lot in this class. Keep exploring more about history and keep updating yourself. We will meet soon with another interesting lesson. Till then, namaskar. Thank you everyone.